The single mom asked, "Only if I sit with you," replied the millionaire boss. Clarissa hadn't meant to cry on the 7:15 a.m. train, certainly not in front of strangers, and definitely not in front of the men whose face she'd seen on more magazine covers than she could count. Yet there she stood, clutching a crumpled daycare bill, her eyes stinging, when a voice behind her gently asked, "Is this seat taken?" She turned, and froze. Before we begin this beautiful story, click subscribe, like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're watching from on comment section. I pray may the good God Almighty bless and preserve you all and your family, amen. Let's begin. The fluorescent lights of Bennett and Associates hummed their monotonous tune as Clarissa Martinez clutched her worn leather portfolio against her chest. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from nerves about the interview, but from the weight of everything riding on this moment. Behind her, in a daycare 3 blocks away, her 4-year-old daughter Emma was learning to count to 20. Clarissa had exactly $47 left in her checking account, rent was due in 5 days, and this junior marketing position was her last lifeline before the carefully constructed house of cards she called stability came crashing down. She'd worn her only professional outfit, a navy blazer she'd found at Goodwill last month, paired with black slacks that she'd hemmed herself after watching a YouTube tutorial at 2 in the morning. The seam on the left leg wasn't quite straight, but she'd prayed no one would notice. Her resume, printed on the nicest paper the dollar store carried, listed a bachelor's degree she'd finished online while Emma slept, 3 years of freelance work cobbled together between diaper changes and midnight fevers, and a determination that couldn't be quantified in bullet points. The reception area smelled like expensive coffee and ambition. Chrome and glass everywhere, abstract art that probably cost more than her car, and a receptionist whose manicure alone represented Clarissa's grocery budget for a week. Other candidates sat in leather chairs, scrolling through phones that hadn't been cracked and repaired with tape. They looked polished, confident, like they belonged in spaces where success was assumed rather than desperately chased. Clarissa had arrived 45 minutes early, partly because she couldn't afford to risk being late, partly because the daycare opened at 7 and her interview wasn't until 9. She'd spent the extra time in her car, practicing answers to questions she'd researched, reviewing the company's recent campaigns, and giving herself the pep talk that had become her morning ritual: "You are enough. You are capable. You are doing this for Emma." "Ms. Martinez." The receptionist's voice cut through her thoughts. "Mr. Hartwell is ready for you. Top floor, corner office." The elevator ride felt like ascending into another atmosphere, one where the air was thinner and the stakes impossibly high. When the doors opened, she stepped into a corridor lined with accolades, industry awards, framed magazine covers featuring the company's meteoric rise, photographs of philanthropic galas where people wore jewels and smiled with the easy confidence of those who'd never had to choose between electricity and groceries. And then she saw him. Bliss Hartwell stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline like something out of a magazine spread. At 38, he'd built Bennett and Associates from a scrappy startup to a marketing empire that commanded 8-figure campaigns. The business magazines called him a visionary. The tabloids called him enigmatic, never married, rarely photographed at social events, devoted to his work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He turned as she entered, and Clarissa felt her prepared speech evaporate. He wasn't what she'd expected. The photos hadn't captured the slight silver threading through his dark hair, or the way his eyes, startlingly blue against his complexion, seemed to look right through professional veneers to the person underneath. He wore his success casually, in a tailored shirt with the sleeves rolled up, as if billion-dollar deals were just another Tuesday. "Ms. Martinez," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but not dominating. "Your portfolio caught my attention. Most applicants send generic applications. You sent a complete rebrand proposal for our nonprofit division." Clarissa felt heat rise to her cheeks. She'd spent 2 weeks on that proposal, working after Emma went to bed, researching every aspect of Bennett and Associates' charitable work. I believe in showing rather than telling, Mr. Hartwell. Call me Bliss. He gestured to a chair, not across from his imposing desk, but at a small table near the window where 2 coffee cups already sat steaming. I had my assistant bring coffee. I hope you like lattes. If not, I can. It's perfect, Clarissa interrupted, too quickly. She couldn't remember the last time someone had made coffee for her. The interview began conventionally enough, questions about her experience, her creative process, her long-term goals. But somewhere between discussing brand psychology and consumer behavior, the conversation shifted. Bliss wasn't just interviewing her, he was listening with an attention she hadn't experienced in years. He asked about the gap in her employment, and instead of the judgment she'd braced for, his expression remained open, curious. I had my daughter, Clarissa said simply. I freelanced during that time, but I won't lie, it was challenging to maintain consistent clients while managing everything alone. Emma, Bliss said, glancing at her portfolio where she'd included a disclosure about her status as a single parent, a risk, her friend had warned, but Clarissa refused to hide her daughter. You mentioned her in your cover letter. 4 years old. Almost 5. Clarissa's voice softened the way it always did when talking about Emma. She's brilliant and stubborn and asks about 1,000,000 questions a day. Being her mother is the most important work I'll ever do, but it's not the only work I want to do. I have ideas, Mr. Hartwell, Bliss. I see brands making the same mistakes, missing opportunities to connect authentically with consumers. I want to be part of creating something meaningful. Bliss leaned back, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The position you applied for is junior level. Honestly, based on this conversation and your proposal, you're overqualified. Clarissa's heart sank. This was it, the polite rejection, the "we'll keep your resume on file," that meant never. However, Bliss continued, we have a senior strategist position that's been open for 3 months. Every candidate has had impressive credentials and zero original thinking. You have original thinking. Would you be interested? The room tilted slightly. Senior strategist. That position had been listed at $90,000 a year, plus benefits. That was impossible. That was a life where she didn't have to choose between new shoes for Emma and paying the water bill. Clarissa swallowed hard. Yes. Absolutely yes. Good. Bliss stood, extending his hand again. HR will send over the paperwork. Can you start in 2 weeks? Clarissa nodded, not trusting her voice. As she gathered her things, Bliss walked her to the elevator, chatting about team dynamics and current projects with an ease that made her forget, for a moment, the vast distance between their worlds. The elevator arrived, and as she stepped inside, Bliss said something that would replay in her mind for hours. Clarissa, your daughter is lucky to have someone who fights as hard as you do. Don't ever apologize for that. The doors closed, and Clarissa let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She made it to her car before the tears came, relief, disbelief, hope that felt almost painful in its intensity. She didn't know that Bliss stood at his window long after she'd left, staring at the city below, thinking about determination and single mothers and the fact that her smile, when she talked about her daughter, was the most genuine thing he'd seen in years. She didn't know that he'd already decided to personally mentor her, though he couldn't explain why. And neither of them knew that this interview, this single intersection of desperation and opportunity, would unravel and rebuild both their lives in ways they couldn't begin to imagine. 2 weeks later, Clarissa's first day at Bennett and Associates began with chaos. Emma had woken up with a fever, not high enough to justify missing work on day 1, but high enough to make Clarissa's stomach twist with guilt as she dropped her at daycare with detailed instructions and emergency contact numbers. The subway had delayed, making her 15 minutes late despite leaving 45 minutes early. Her carefully ironed blouse had acquired a mysterious stain during the commute. And now, rushing toward the building's revolving doors while simultaneously texting the daycare to check on Emma, she collided directly with someone carrying a box of pastries. Coffee exploded. Croissants launched into airborne trajectories. Clarissa stumbled, her phone clattering to the pavement, and strong hands caught her shoulders before she could follow it. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't." The apology died on her lips. Bliss Hartwell stood before her, now wearing a significant portion of his coffee down the front of his impeccably tailored suit. Flakes of croissant clung to his shoulder. Butter smeared across his tie. For one frozen moment, they stared at each other, her horrified, him unreadable. Then, impossibly, he laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a dismissive sound. It was a genuine, surprised laugh that transformed his entire face, crinkling the corners of his eyes and revealing a dimple she hadn't noticed during her interview. "Well," he said, picking a piece of croissant from his collar, "this is one way to start a Monday. Are you hurt?" Your suit, I'm so sorry, I'll pay for the cleaning, I wasn't looking where Clarissa bent to gather the scattered pastries, her face burning. "Clarissa." His voice was gentle. "It's fine. It's just coffee and expensive bread." He crouched beside her, helping collect the ruined breakfast. "Though I was looking forward to the chocolate croissant. That's a real loss." His humor diffused her panic slightly. As they stood, her phone buzzed between them on the pavement. The daycare's number flashed on the cracked screen. Clarissa's expression must have changed because Bliss immediately stepped back. "Take it," he said. "I'll grab napkins." The call was brief. Emma's fever had broken, she was fine, just clingy. Clarissa hung up with relief flooding through her. "Everything okay?" Bliss had returned with a stack of napkins and was attempting, unsuccessfully, to clean his tie. "My daughter had a fever this morning." "She's fine now, just," Clarissa caught herself. This was her boss, not her friend. First day, and she was already bringing personal problems into the workplace. "I'm sorry. That's not your concern." Something shifted in Bliss's expression. "You're a mother first. That's never something to apologize for." He glanced down at his ruined suit, then at his watch. "I have a board meeting in 30 minutes that I desperately don't want to attend. This gives me an excuse to reschedule. You might have actually done me a favor." "I doubt the board will see it that way. The board has never had to raise a child while building a career. Their perspective is limited." He handed her his stack of napkins. "You have coffee on your shoulder, by the way." They cleaned up in companionable silence, the early morning foot traffic flowing around them. As they entered the building together, the security guard did a double-take at Bliss's appearance but wisely said nothing. In the elevator, surrounded by chrome and their reflection in multiple panels, Bliss said, "I was bringing those pastries for your team. Welcome breakfast tradition. I'll have to send someone out for replacements." "You don't have to." "I want to." The elevator chimed for his floor. Before stepping out, he turned back. "Clarissa. Breathe. First days are supposed to be chaotic. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." As the doors closed, Clarissa caught her reflection, disheveled, coffee-stained, but smiling. Somehow, destroying her boss's breakfast had made her feel less like an imposter walking into a world she didn't belong in. She didn't notice Bliss standing in the corridor, watching the elevator numbers descend, a small smile playing at his lips as he texted his assistant, "Cancel the board meeting. Personal emergency. And send someone for more pastries, chocolate croissants especially." The morning settled into a whirlwind of introductions, orientation materials, and information overload. Clarissa's new team, 3 other strategists, all impressive and surprisingly welcoming, took turns explaining current campaigns, office culture, and which coffee on the 3rd floor was worth the elevator ride. By noon, her head spun with names, project codes, and the realization that she'd barely looked at her phone. She slipped into a bathroom stall to check on Emma, 3 reassuring messages from the daycare, including a photo of her daughter painting, tongue stuck out in concentration. The relief was physical. "You're the new senior strategist, right?" A voice called from the sinks. "The one Bliss personally hired?" Clarissa emerged to find two women touching up their makeup, both immaculately dressed, both studying her with undisguised curiosity. Clarissa Martinez, she confirmed, washing her hands. Angela Ross, PR. The blonde extended perfectly manicured nails. This is Judith Chen, legal. We were just discussing how unusual your hire was, Judith said, her tone friendly but probing. Bliss doesn't usually involve himself in mid-level recruitment. Senior strategist is hardly mid-level, Angela corrected. What's your background? Harvard. Yale. I heard you impressed him with some kind of revolutionary proposal. Clarissa felt the familiar prickle of defensive pride. City College. Online degree program. I wrote a rebrand concept for the nonprofit division. The women exchanged glances, not quite dismissive, but surprised. Well, Angela said finally, he must have seen something special. Bliss has instincts about people. When he hired me 5 years ago, everyone questioned his judgment. Now I run the entire PR division. Her smile warmed slightly. Word of advice. Don't let people make you feel like you don't belong here. Bliss doesn't make hiring mistakes. After they left, Clarissa stared at her reflection. The woman looking back wore confidence like an ill-fitting coat, recognizable but not quite natural yet. She thought about Bliss's words, "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." She wanted to believe him. The afternoon brought her first real challenge, a creative meeting for a luxury automotive client. The conference room was intimidating, glass walls overlooking the city, a table that could seat 20, and a presentation already loaded with mock-ups from the existing campaign. Clarissa took a seat near the middle, her notebook open, pen ready. Around her, senior staff filed in with the easy confidence of people who'd attended 1,000 such meetings. She recognized a few faces from the morning introductions, but most were strangers who probably wondered what the new hire was doing in a senior strategy session on day one. Then Bliss walked in, showered and changed, in a fresh suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and the room's energy shifted. People sat straighter. Side conversations stopped. He commanded attention without saying a word, moving to the head of the table with a tablet and coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Boss," in faded letters. "Let's get started," he said, pulling up the campaign materials. Jensen Automotive wants to launch their electric luxury line to millennials and Gen Z. Current strategy focuses on performance specs and sustainability. Thoughts? The creative director launched into a presentation, sleek visuals, celebrity endorsements, social media integration. It was polished, expensive-looking, and utterly generic. Clarissa had seen variations of this campaign from a dozen luxury brands. It would be fine. Forgettable, but fine. She kept her mouth shut. First day. Learn the dynamics before contributing. But as the presentation continued, she found herself making notes, not of what was being said, but of what was missing. The strategy assumed young buyers wanted to be sold luxury and sustainability. It didn't consider that this demographic valued authenticity over aspiration, community over status. Clarissa. Bliss's voice cut through her thoughts. You're being quiet. What's your take? Every eye in the room turned to her. She felt the weight of judgment, the unspoken question, what does the new hire know that we don't? She could play it safe. Agree with the strategy. Keep her head down. Or she could be the strategist Bliss had hired. It's beautifully executed, she began carefully, but it's talking at the audience instead of with them. Gen Z especially, they don't trust traditional advertising. They trust content creators, peer reviews, and brands that show rather than tell. The creative director's expression cooled. We have influencer partnerships built into phase 2. Right, but those feel like transactions, Clarissa said, warming to her argument despite her nervousness. What if instead of paying influencers to feature the car, we created a program where eco-conscious content creators get to test drive it for a month, document their real experience, the good and the bad, and we commit to implementing feedback in future models. We'd be showing that we value authentic input over controlled messaging. Silence. Clarissa's heart hammered. She'd just criticized a senior team's work on her first day. This was how careers ended before they began. Then Bliss leaned forward, his expression intent. Keep going. The sustainability angle is good, but everyone's talking about being green now. What makes this car different isn't just that it's electric, it's that it's luxury without compromise. Young buyers are told they have to choose between ethics and quality, values and pleasure. This car says they can have both. The campaign should feel like a secret being shared among friends who understand that doing the right thing doesn't mean sacrificing what you love. She looked around the table, gauging reactions. Most faces remained neutral, but Bliss was nodding slowly. What would that look like practically? He asked. Clarissa pulled out her phone, showing him a sketch she'd made while supposedly listening to the presentation. User-generated content as the centerpiece. Real people, real stories. We create a hashtag campaign where test drivers document their experience. We provide professional filming equipment, but they control the narrative. We pull the best content for TV spots. It's authentic, it's engaging, and it positions Jensen as confident enough to let customers tell their story. The creative director looked like he'd swallowed something sour, but others around the table were leaning in, interested. It's risky, the marketing VP said. What if the feedback is negative? Then we listen and adapt, Clarissa replied. That's the point. This generation doesn't expect perfection, they expect honesty and responsiveness. Bliss set down his tablet, his gaze on Clarissa. Develop it into a full pitch. You have 1 week. What? She blinked. You identified the problem with our current approach. Now solve it. Pull whoever you need from your team. Present to me next Monday. He stood, gathering his things. Unless you think a week isn't enough time. It was a challenge, clearly. A test. A week is perfect, Clarissa said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. As the room emptied, the creative director paused beside her. Ambitious move, tearing apart a strategy on day one. I wasn't trying to save it. But his expression wasn't entirely hostile. Bliss doesn't hand out assignments lightly. If he's giving you a shot, you either have something special or he's seeing something the rest of us missed. Either way, don't waste it. Alone in the conference room, Clarissa stared at the city beyond the glass. She'd just committed to developing a full campaign pitch in 1 week while navigating a new job, managing single parenthood, and proving she deserved to be here. What have I done? Her phone buzzed, Emma's daycare, confirming pickup time. Reality crashed back. She had to leave by 5:30 to get there before closing, which meant she had 4 hours to familiarize herself with the automotive client, assemble a team, and start conceptualizing the campaign. As she packed up, another message came through, from an unknown number. I knew you'd have something to say. That's why I asked. Don't second-guess yourself. The instinct that made you speak up is the same one that got you hired. Trust it. BH. Bliss Hartwell had her personal number. Was texting her encouragement. On her first day. Clarissa saved the contact, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the overwhelming challenge ahead. She didn't know that Bliss was in his office, staring at his phone, wondering why encouraging a new employee felt more significant than any business decision he'd made in months. She didn't know he'd spent the morning board meeting he'd rescheduled thinking about her determination, her authenticity, the way she'd talked about being a mother as if it were both her greatest vulnerability and her superpower. And neither of them realized that what had started as a professional opportunity was already becoming something far more complicated. The week that followed was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Clarissa assembled a team of 3, a junior designer named Marcus who had brilliant visual instincts, a data analyst named Priya who could spot consumer trends like reading tea leaves, and a copywriter named Jason who understood authenticity because he'd grown up without money and never forgot it. Together, they commandeered a small conference room and covered every surface with sketches, data points, and increasingly ambitious ideas. Emma adapted to the new schedule with the resilience of children. Clarissa had found a nearby after-school program, expensive but manageable with her new salary, where her daughter could play until 6 p.m. Still, Clarissa left the office every day at exactly 5:30, rushing through subway cars and crowded sidewalks to make pickup on time, then returning home to split her evening between reading bedtime stories and refining campaign concepts after Emma fell asleep. She saw Bliss in passing, a nod in the hallway, a brief exchange in the elevator, but he maintained a professional distance that felt deliberate. She told herself it was appropriate. He was her boss, not her friend. The encouraging text had been a one-time gesture. Then came Thursday at 5:45 p.m. Clarissa was in the small conference room, gathering her things while Marcus and Priya continued debating color palettes. She had 15 minutes to catch the subway, grab Emma, and Clarissa. Bliss stood in the doorway, loosened tie and 5 o'clock shadow making him look less CEO and more exhausted human. "Can I borrow you for a minute?" "I have to," she started, glancing at her watch. "I know. Emma's pickup is at 6. I'll make this quick." The fact that he remembered her daughter's schedule created a strange warmth in her chest. She followed him to his office, acutely aware of the time ticking away. His office, which had been intimidating during her interview, now felt surprisingly lived in. A jacket hung on a coat rack. Papers covered his desk in organized chaos. A forgotten coffee mug sat on the windowsill, and beside it, unexpectedly, a small framed photograph of a young boy, maybe 7 or 8, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. Bliss caught her looking. "My nephew," he said quietly. "He passed away 6 years ago. Leukemia." The casual revelation of something so profound stopped Clarissa mid-breath. "I'm so sorry." His name was Tyler. He wanted to be an astronaut. Bliss picked up the photo, studying it with an expression that mixed grief and love. "His mother, my sister, Caroline, she was a single parent too. His father left when Tyler was diagnosed, decided he couldn't handle it. So Caroline did it alone, the treatments, the hospital stays, the medical bills that bankrupted her. I helped financially, but I wasn't. I was building this company. Always traveling, always in meetings. I missed a lot." He set the photo down carefully, turning to face her. "I'm telling you this because I saw something in your interview. When you talked about Emma, about being her mother while building your career, you had this look. Like you were carrying something precious and terrifying at the same time. I recognized it. Caroline had that same look for years." Clarissa's throat tightened. This wasn't a boss sharing backstory with an employee. This was one person recognizing another's struggle across the gulf of different circumstances. "After Tyler died," Bliss continued, "Caroline told me something I'll never forget. She said, 'You gave us money, but what I needed was time. Someone to sit in that hospital room. Someone to tell me I wasn't failing because I was too tired to cook dinner or forgot about picture day.' She wasn't angry, she was just honest. And I realized I'd been so focused on solving problems with resources that I'd missed what actually mattered." "Why are you telling me this?" Clarissa asked gently. "Because I don't want you to burn yourself out trying to prove you belong here. You do belong here. But I also don't want you to sacrifice being Emma's mother for a career. Both can coexist." He checked his watch. "It's 5:52. You need to leave. The pitch is Monday. We're not ready. Then you'll work with what you have. Clarissa, I've watched you this week. You're working during lunch, staying late every night until you absolutely have to leave, and I'd bet money you're working after Emma goes to bed." His expression gentled. "I'm not impressed by self-sacrifice. I'm impressed by sustainable excellence. Go home. Be with your daughter. Come in fresh Monday." Clarissa stood, but found herself hesitating at the door. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really hire me? Angela said you never involve yourself in mid-level recruitment. The senior strategist position, did you create it for me? Bliss was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. I looked at your resume and saw someone who'd built a career from scratch while raising a child alone. I read your proposal and saw creativity, authenticity, and strategic thinking that most people with 10 years more experience couldn't match. And then I met you, and I saw determination without arrogance. Intelligence without pretension. Someone who understands that the best work comes from people who've actually lived, not just studied. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. I didn't create the position for you. But I had stopped interviewing candidates because no one fit what I needed. Then you walked in, and I knew. So yes, I involved myself. And no, I don't regret it. The air between them felt charged, heavy with something unspoken. Clarissa recognized the edge of something dangerous, an attraction that was wholly inappropriate and utterly undeniable. I should go, she whispered. You should. But neither of them moved. Then Clarissa's phone alarm shattered the moment, 5:55, her final warning. She jumped back, breaking the spell. Monday, Bliss said, his voice carefully professional again. 10 a.m. You've got this. Clarissa fled, there was no other word for it. She practically ran to the elevator, her heart hammering for more than just rushing. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Bliss standing in his doorway, watching her leave with an expression she couldn't begin to decipher. On the subway, clutching the handrail as the car swayed, she replayed the conversation. He'd shared something deeply personal. He'd seen her, not just the employee, but the mother, the woman struggling to balance impossible demands. And for a moment, she'd seen him too, not the billionaire CEO, but a man carrying his own grief, his own regrets. This is dangerous, she thought. This is complicated. But when she picked up Emma, her daughter launching into her arms with a painting of what might have been a cat or possibly a dinosaur, the world righted itself. This was real. This was what mattered. Emma chattered the whole subway ride home about her day, about her new friend Jacob who could burp the alphabet, about how she'd learned to spell butterfly. Clarissa listened, asked questions, and pushed thoughts of Bliss Hartwell into a corner of her mind labeled, professional relationships only. After dinner and bath time and 3 storybooks, after Emma finally fell asleep with her arms around her favorite stuffed elephant, Clarissa returned to her laptop. She had campaign materials to finalize, a pitch to perfect. At 11:37 p.m., her phone buzzed. I hope you're not working. BH. She stared at the message, then at her laptop screen covered in notes and mock-ups. I hope you're not either, she typed back before she could overthink it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I'm going home now. You should be sleeping. Big day Monday. Good night, Clarissa. Good night, Bliss. She closed her laptop, but sleep didn't come easily. She lay in her small bedroom, listening to the city sounds through thin walls, thinking about conversations that felt too intimate, about looks that lasted too long, about her boss who wasn't supposed to text her at 11:30 at night with what felt suspiciously like concern. This was her second week at Bennett and Associates, and already the lines between professional and personal were blurring in ways she hadn't anticipated. She didn't know that Bliss lay awake too, in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, thinking about a single mother who destroyed his breakfast and somehow begun to rearrange his carefully ordered world. Neither of them acknowledged what was becoming increasingly obvious: this wasn't just about a job anymore. Monday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made New York feel like the movies: golden light, cool wind, possibility in the air. Clarissa dressed in her best outfit, the one she'd been saving for an occasion that mattered. Emma had helped pick it out, declaring the burgundy blouse fancy like a princess, which was high praise from a 4-year-old with strong opinions about fashion. The pitch was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room, the intimidating one with glass walls where everyone on the floor could watch. The Jensen automotive executives would be there via video conference. Bliss would be there in person. This was her chance to prove she belonged at Bennett and Associates, that his faith in her wasn't misplaced. Marcus, Priya, and Jason met her at 8 a.m. to do final run-throughs. They'd built something special, Clarissa could feel it. The campaign concept, which they'd named Real Luxury, centered on authentic experiences over manufactured aspiration. They'd created mock-ups showing real test drivers documenting their experiences, a social media strategy that prioritized conversation over monologue, and a pledge from Jensen to implement customer feedback in future models. It was bold. It was risky. It was exactly what the brand needed. At 9:45, they set up in the conference room. Clarissa's hands shook slightly as she loaded the presentation, but it was excitement now rather than fear. She'd worked too hard to doubt herself at this point. The Jensen executives appeared on screen at 10 o'clock exactly, four serious-faced men in suits who looked like they ate underperforming campaigns for breakfast. Bliss entered moments later with the VP of Marketing and two other senior executives, taking seats near the front. His eyes met hers for a brief moment. He nodded almost imperceptibly, "You've got this," and somehow it steadied her. "Good morning," Clarissa began, her voice clear and confident. 3 weeks ago, you asked Bennett and Associates to help you launch your electric luxury line to a younger demographic. What we're presenting today isn't just a campaign, it's a fundamental shift in how luxury brands connect with conscious consumers. For the next 40 minutes, she walked them through the strategy, the execution, the projected metrics. Marcus presented visuals that were stunning in their simplicity. Priya shared data showing Gen Z's trust in peer recommendations over traditional advertising. Jason read copy that felt like a conversation rather than a pitch. And Clarissa tied it all together, weaving a narrative about authenticity and community and luxury redefined. When she finished, silence filled the room, the kind that could mean either disaster or success. Then one of the Jensen executives leaned forward on screen. "Ms. Martinez, this is not what we expected." Her stomach dropped. "Here it comes." The polite rejection. "It's better," he continued, a slow smile spreading across his face. "It's significantly better. This is the first pitch in 3 years that hasn't felt like a variation on what our competitors are doing. When can we start production?" The relief was dizzying. Around the table, her team exchanged grins. Bliss's expression remained professionally neutral, but she caught the slight curve at the corner of his mouth. The next hour involved contract negotiations, timeline discussions, and budget approvals, all conducted with the smooth efficiency of people who knew they were building something successful. By 11:30, Jensen had signed off on the campaign with an increased budget and an exclusive contract for Bennett and Associates to handle all their marketing for the next 3 years. As the video conference ended and the room emptied, Bliss remained seated. So did Clarissa. "That was exceptional," he said once they were alone. "You took a risk, trusted your instincts, and delivered exactly what the client needed even though they didn't know they needed it. This is the kind of work that defines careers." It was the team, Clarissa deflected. "Marcus and Priya and Jason. Who you led. Take the win, Clarissa." He stood, moving closer. "I have something to tell you, and I need you to listen without interrupting." His tone made her pulse quicken. "Okay. When I hired you, it was purely professional. You were qualified, you had potential, and I saw an opportunity to bring in fresh perspective." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "But over these past 2 weeks, something's changed. The coffee incident, the late-night texts, Thursday evening in my office, I've been telling myself it's just mutual respect between colleagues. But I'm a terrible liar, especially to myself." Clarissa's breath caught. She knew what was coming, could feel it in the air between them, and she should stop him, maintain professional boundaries, protect her career. "I'm attracted to you," Bliss said simply. "Not just physically, though that's certainly there. I'm drawn to your strength, your authenticity, the way you fight for what matters. I'm drawn to watching you be Emma's mother and brilliant strategist simultaneously, refusing to diminish either role. And I know this is inappropriate. I'm your boss, you're new to the company, there are power dynamics at play that make this complicated at best. Please conclude and end the story as this session with just 2,000 words count. Clarissa's heart hammered against her ribs. Every professional instinct screamed at her to shut this down, to maintain boundaries, to protect the career she'd fought so hard to build. But standing there, watching Bliss Hartwell, billionaire CEO, her boss, the men who'd seen her not as a risk but as potential, confess something that mirrored the feelings she'd been desperately trying to ignore, she found herself unable to retreat into safety. "You can't say things like that," she whispered, though her tone lacked conviction. "I know. Which is why I'm also telling you that I'm recusing myself from your direct supervision. Effective immediately, you'll report to the VP of Marketing. I won't be involved in your performance reviews, your promotions, or any decisions that could be construed as favoritism or coercion." His blue eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. "I'm removing every professional barrier between us. What happens next, if anything happens at all, will be entirely your choice, made freely, without pressure or professional consequence." Bliss. She struggled to find words. "I'm a single mother with a 4-year-old. I have $47,000 in student debt, a 10-year-old car that needs new brakes, and I shop at thrift stores. Your world and mine, they don't overlap. This isn't a fairy tale." "You're right. It's not a fairy tale." He stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, see the silver threads in his dark hair. "It's better than that. It's real. Clarissa, I've spent 15 years building an empire, attending galas with people who see dollar signs instead of human beings, dating women who wanted the lifestyle more than the person. I was content with that. Then you walked into my office, apologized for a gap in your resume caused by raising your daughter alone, and looked at me like I was a person instead of a bank account. Do you have any idea how rare that is? You barely know me. I know you work until midnight perfecting campaigns, then wake up at 6 to make Emma pancakes shaped like butterflies. I know you texted the daycare 4 times during the Jensen pitch to make sure she was okay. I know you bought Marcus coffee every morning last week because you noticed he looked tired. I know you're terrified of failing, not because you're afraid of losing your job, but because you're afraid of letting down everyone who depends on you." His voice softened. "I know enough." Tears pricked at Clarissa's eyes. When had anyone last truly seen her? Not the struggle, not the single mother piecing together a life from determination and hope, but her, the woman beneath all those roles. "This is crazy," she said, but she didn't step back. "Probably. I'm willing to be crazy if you are." He reached out, his fingers brushing her hand, a question, not a demand. "Have dinner with me. Not as your boss, not as a professional obligation. As two people who might want to see if this connection is real." Clarissa thought about Emma, about stability, about the life she'd carefully constructed where every decision was measured against risk and necessity. She thought about the apartment with its leaky faucet and thin walls, about choosing between new shoes and library fines, about the weight of doing everything alone. Then she thought about Bliss's office on Thursday evening, about the photograph of Tyler, about a man who'd built an empire but remembered what mattered. She thought about how he'd noticed when she needed to leave for pickup, how he'd texted her to stop working and sleep, how he'd looked at her just now, not like she was a project or a conquest, but like she was something precious and worth the complication. "Okay," she whispered. "Dinner. But you're meeting Emma first. That's non-negotiable. If this is real, you need to understand that she's my priority. Always." Something in Bliss's expression crumbled with relief. "I wouldn't have it any other way." 6 months later. The playground in Central Park was Emma's favorite, the one with the big slide and swings that went high enough to touch the sky, or so she claimed. Saturday afternoons had become sacred time. Clarissa, Emma, and Bliss, who'd learned to push swings at exactly the right height and had memorized every word to Emma's favorite story about a brave little elephant. "Higher, Bliss! Higher!" Emma shrieked with delight, her curls flying as the swing arced upward. Clarissa watched from a nearby bench, her heart full in ways she hadn't thought possible 6 months ago. The office knew about their relationship now. Bliss had insisted on transparency, making the announcement himself and ensuring everyone understood the reporting structure changes. There had been whispers, sure. Angela from PR had raised eyebrows. The creative director had made a snide comment about sleeping your way to the top that had resulted in Bliss personally escorting him to HR and then out of the building entirely. But mostly, people had been surprisingly supportive. Priya had hugged her. Marcus had high-fived Bliss. Jason had simply said, "About time." The tension was exhausting. The Jensen campaign had won 3 industry awards. Clarissa had been promoted to creative director, a position she'd earned through the 5 campaigns she'd led since, each one more successful than the last. She'd moved into a new apartment, one with working heat and walls thick enough that she couldn't hear her neighbors' arguments. Emma had her own room, painted purple at her insistence, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. But more than the professional success or financial stability, what had changed was the loneliness. For 5 years, Clarissa had carried everything alone, the decisions, the worries, the exhaustion, the joy. Now, when Emma woke up with nightmares, Bliss was there with warm milk and terrible monster impressions that made her giggle. When work deadlines collided with school events, he rearranged his schedule without being asked. When Clarissa doubted herself, he reminded her of every success she'd earned. And Emma, her brilliant, observant, sometimes stubborn daughter, had accepted Bliss into their lives with the easy grace of children who recognize genuine love. She'd asked, about 3 months in, if Bliss could be her dad. Not her father, she understood that wasn't possible, but her dad, the person who showed up, who cared, who stayed. Bliss had cried. Actually cried, right there in their living room, and said it would be the greatest honor of his life. "Mama. Watch this." Emma launched herself off the swing at the peak of its arc, landing in the sand with a thud and a triumphant "ta-da." Clarissa's heart stopped briefly, then restarted as Emma popped up unharmed. Bliss jogged over, equal parts impressed and concerned. "That was very brave and very dangerous," he said, crouching to brush sand from her jacket. "Maybe warn us before you attempt acrobatics." "You said brave people do scary things," Emma pointed out, her logic unassailable. "I'm beginning to regret that lesson," Bliss muttered, but he was smiling. As the afternoon sun stretched their shadows long across the playground, the 3 of them walked toward the park exit, Emma between them, holding both their hands. She chattered about her upcoming kindergarten show, about how she was going to be a flower and had to remember to stand very still even though standing still was boring. Clarissa caught Bliss's eye over Emma's head. He smiled, that private smile he reserved for moments like this, when the city rushed around them but they existed in their own pocket of peace. This wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined as a young woman. There had been no prince on a white horse, no magical transformation, no problems that dissolved with true love's kiss. Instead, there had been coffee spills and late-night work sessions and the messy reality of blending lives. There had been Emma's adjustment period, Bliss's learning curve about parenting, Clarissa's struggle to accept help without feeling like she was failing at independence. But it was real. It was complicated and imperfect and more beautiful than any fantasy. "What are you thinking about?" Bliss asked as they reached his car, a practical sedan he'd bought specifically because it had the best safety ratings for car seats. "That I'm happy," Clarissa said simply. "Genuinely, surprisingly, sometimes still can't believe this is my life happy." He pulled her close, Emma squirming between them demanding to be included in the hug. "Me too," he whispered against her hair. "Me too." That evening, after Emma had been tucked into bed with her elephant and 3 storybooks, Clarissa and Bliss sat on her apartment balcony, small but theirs, watching the city lights flicker to life. "I have something to tell you," Bliss said, his tone careful. "The board approved the expansion." We're opening 3 new offices, London, Singapore, Tokyo. That's amazing, Clarissa said, genuinely thrilled for him. I want you to lead creative for the international division. It would mean travel, but we'd coordinate schedules, and Emma could come on some trips, and, he stopped, studying her expression. You're not excited. I am. It's just. Clarissa struggled to articulate the fear. What if people say I only got it because of us? What if they're right? Bliss turned to face her fully, his hands cupping her face with a tenderness that still made her breath catch. Clarissa Martinez, you are the most talented creative director this company has ever had. The Jensen campaign increased their market share by 32%. The Moreau Cosmetics rebrand you led became a case study at Columbia Business School. Your team has the highest retention rate in the company because people want to work with you. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. Yes, you're with me. But you earned every success on your own merit. Anyone who says otherwise hasn't been paying attention. What did I do to deserve you? She whispered. You spilled coffee on me and refused to apologize for being a mother. You showed up authentically in a world that rewards pretense. You reminded me what actually matters. He kissed her forehead, gentle and sure. The question is, what did I do to deserve you? From Emma's room came a sleepy call, Mama. Is Bliss staying for breakfast pancakes? They looked at each other and laughed, that easy laughter of people who'd found their rhythm. I'm staying for breakfast pancakes. Bliss called back. Butterfly-shaped. Emma demanded. Obviously butterfly-shaped, Bliss confirmed. Later, lying in bed, Clarissa thought about the woman who'd walked into Bennett and Associates 6 months ago, desperate, determined, carrying the weight of single parenthood like armor and burden combined. She'd wanted a job, security, a chance to prove herself. She'd found all that. But she'd also found something she hadn't known to look for, partnership. Not someone to rescue her, but someone to build with. Not a fantasy, but a real, complicated, beautiful reality. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Bliss, already asleep in the next room. Thank you for taking a chance on dinner. Best decision I ever convinced you to make. She smiled, typing back, second best. First was destroying your breakfast. His response came immediately, that too. Good night, Clarissa. I love you. I love you too. And in the morning, there would be butterfly pancakes and kindergarten drop-off and creative meetings and the beautiful chaos of a life she'd built from nothing, not alone anymore, but together. The single mother and the millionaire boss. It sounded like a fairy tale. But it was so much better than that. It was real. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to watch more that are coming and don't forget to like and comment where you are watching from.